Good day, everybody. Welcome to the Deal Scout. On today's show, we're having a conversation, and I'm sure you have seen the brands that this man has touched and been a part of. Mr. Mark, welcome to the Deal Scout.
Thank you, Josh. Nice to be here.
Yeah. All right. So, real quick, man, give us an overview, some ideas on some of the brands that you have helped built, invested in, or been a part of over your career.
Sure. After my corporate career, my first sort of brand after a couple failed ventures was Zico Coconut Water, and I'll come kind of circle back to that. But I started that, built that, and then sold that to Coca-Cola at the end of 2013. And then I became an active angel investor and eventually started an investment firm, first called Power Plant, where we invested in plant-based businesses. So there we backed Beyond Meat, Thrive Market, Appeal Sciences, had some good wins there and also some painful lessons along the way, like any venture investing. And right now, we've transformed the firm to be called Ground Force Capital to do growth investing. So we invest in typically companies 20 to 100 million in revenue. We'll write 20 to 30 million dollar checks and dive in and support them. That includes Liquid Death, Bobby infant formula business, Partake non-alc beer. What else? What am I forgetting about? A plant-based beverage brand called Owen, Only What You Need, that we sold recently. A healthy, better for you shot called Vive Organic that we sold a couple of years ago. So generally health and wellness, predominantly food and beverage, predominantly consumer facing, but we're beginning to look back into the supply chain as well, all around health and wellness and sustainability.
So I love the background. You built a company, sold it to Coke, but we as you're doing that, I'd love to hear the build and sell process, especially in the beverage. We're involved with a few beverage companies, consumer product goods, and
Hey,
and it's a unique space that I'm
it's
learning more than I thought I ever would. So, talk to us about the Zico journey, building, sold, and it looks like you're involved again, right? So I'd love
correct.
to hear
Correct.
that.
Yeah, I'll take you through that. Yeah. Look, I mean, I came to learn. I had no background in the beverage industry when I started it. Maybe that's not true. I ran a corporate business that was a supplier to the beverage industry selling packaging, which is, has nothing to do with actually building, the brands itself. So it was a painful lesson for me, but I quit my corporate job, moved with my then wife and young family to New York, and kind of had to learn the hard way how to build, any business, but any brand, but particularly beverage brand, is really hand-to-hand combat. So this was 2004 to 2008 were kind of the brutal, critical years of selling into natural food stores, yoga studios, college campuses, et cetera, literally up and down the street. And I joke, but it's true. Literally in the first year, there were some days and weeks where I had more in parking tickets than I did in sales, you know? So, and the wake up call was as well, I left a nice six-figure, corporate job with a real path to be, part of the C-suite of a, multi-billion dollar Fortune 50 company. And the first year, my salary base, my income was cut to one third, not by one third, but I made one third as much as I did the year before. And moving to New York, our expenses tripled. So
Yeah.
that math was not working very well. And it was really what I thought would take a couple years to get to, back to a reasonable lifestyle, really took 9. I mean, by 5, we started to get some security, but honestly, I never made as much in an income as I did in my corporate days, but ultimately, fortunately, did create a lot of value on the when we sold the company.
The delayed gratification for a founder, right? I've been on food stamps. I've been bankrupt. I've had to move back in with mom and dad. I've had to knock on doors, door to door sales. I've had to work on the back of a moving truck to buy diapers while building my tech company. People are like, oh man, you're in venture capital or you're building a tech company. I'm like, yeah, but I'm working on the back of a moving truck to buy diapers. It's hard because you have delayed gratification, you have delayed reward, right? And that's what we're hopefully building for, some type of
Look,
build and exit.
you nailed it, Josh. I tell, we don't do a lot of early stage investing anymore, but when I'm talking to founders, which I do a lot, or people that are thinking about ideas in the early stage, one of my questions is, look, are you prepared to do this, go after this dream for a decade plus
Mhm.
with no, and what if I could tell you that there's a 90% probability that you're never going to make any real money. Your investors won't either. And even after a decade, the business could either fail or become a zombie and sort of go on that way. Would you still go after this? And usually I see people go, what do you mean? And I said, well, those are the statistics, right? Even if you're and the reality is the 10% don't really make any real money. But what I love is every once in a while you come across that entrepreneur that just says, you know what? I think I'm going to be the exception, but I don't really care. What else am I going to do? Like, I love this. I'm passionate about it. I'm doing it anyway. So it's going to be what it's going to be. That's the person I want to back,
For
right?
sure.
Because you just don't know. And here's the reality as well. What I've come to realize, Josh, I started Zico 20 years ago. Now I have, I think people would look at me and say, I made it, right? I have our firm has 500 million under management, right? We're writing 20 to 30 million dollar checks. I've probably helped raise $1 billion for our firm and other companies. We've had multiple exits. But the reality is I still am an entrepreneur, right? My partner and I are trying to build a multi-billion dollar asset management firm. And so what I was talking to him about recently is it takes what it takes. Like, I'll give you an example. Right now, I'll come back to the story, but Zico, the brand I founded, we did buy that back. I'll take you through that story and tell you how it's still a grind, right? In 2020, Coke made an announcement globally that they were selling off or shutting down 200 brands to focus on their core. Consumers during COVID went back to what they knew. They had the distribution system to get Coke, Diet Coke, all the other products on the shelf. So they basically were focusing on the core. So Zico was going to be sold off or shut down like a lot of other better for you brands and smaller brands. So we decided to buy it back as in what we called our second fund, Power Plant Ventures 2, and rebuild it. So we bought the brand, put a team in place. I'm not running the company. I haven't run the company, but I'm an active sort of chairman of the board. And the company's doing great, but like a lot of growing brands, and you know this in beverage, we need to raise money. And so we are supporting the investment. We will invest, but we can only invest so much out of our fund. And so the company is actively out raising money. Well, I'm in the weeds, right? I'm on calls, I'm in meetings, I'm working my, frankly, ass off, if I can say
Yeah,
that.
you can say it.
And I wonder sometimes, God, am I back just grinding? But the reality is I'm in choice. I know I could do something else. I know I don't have to do this. I haven't really worried about money since I made 200 bucks a month as a Peace Corps volunteer. But I love the game. I love the game. And so, and that the reality is that's what it takes, And so I've been building Ground Force now with my partner for a decade, right? We haven't made it. I don't feel like we've made it yet.
Yeah. I want to hit on the ground force capital where investing is a force for good. Before we hit that, if you would have asked me before I was a firefighter medic, when the real estate market crashed for me, I was in spec housing. I built $8 million worth of housing,
Wow.
and then the market crashed on me, and I had to go get a real job. Firefighter medic, I did that. I had security of a government job, and I was working. And I left that. I cashed out my pension to go all in on a fitness technology that I had. And if you would have said, you're going to get your butt whooped for the next 15 years, absolutely brutal. You're going to stand on a bridge one day thinking of jumping off. Will you do it? I would have been like, you have no clue what you're talking about. That's not going to be me. And I would have done it.
Yeah.
Um, Other people, maybe 9 years. It only took you 9 years. You're smarter than me and faster. But it is a grind. Where do you think, from all the deals that you've invested in, all the things that you've seen, you've pushed through the 9 years of getting your butt whooped and you signed up for it again,
All
right?
right.
You signed up for it. Where do you think that internal drive comes from?
Yeah, that's a great question, Josh. Is a great question. Everybody's different and they've got their own stories. For me, thankfully I've done a lot of therapy around this, which has been
Me too.
very helpful.
Yes.
And one of the things I came to realize is ironically, I am still reconciling, and I think I've done quite a good job of reconciling that who I am and that drive is actually comes from growing up with a little bit of the opposite in my family. I had a wonderful, loving, caring family. My father was a brilliant man, a nuclear physicist. I didn't get that gene. But to a certain extent, my family really valued social impact, valued um, um, supporting those in need, very sort of activist Catholic background in a way. And I loved that and I valued that. But I never really, I had this drive, this creativity, this drive. When I was growing up, it wasn't about money. Nobody I grew up with in Pittsburgh had any money. So it wasn't about that. It was for fun and competition and excitement and newness. And as I later started to understand a little bit better how the world worked and how, came to understand money as, a flow, and that helped unlock some, fun things I wanted to be able to do in life, as well as, the impact I wanted to make. I began to channel that towards business. But fundamentally, this has been in me from the time I was little. And it was sort of a certain amount of it was a drive to be recognized. Growing up as the youngest of six kids, where it was all about, intellectual, it was about making impact in the world. I had a drive that was different than my siblings, and I wanted to be recognized. But the beauty is now I see that and I know that and I know how to give that to myself, but the drive hasn't gone away, right? And as an example, I think one of the interesting things for me is exactly what you said. Like, I chose to go back into this. The difference is I chose it consciously. What I see is a lot of second time entrepreneurs. I know billionaires that go back to the grind, but with all due respect, they do it unconsciously. They're not even thinking about whether they're in choice of doing it, whether they want to do it or not. And boy, that's not freedom to me. Freedom to me is I know I have a choice. Every day I wake up, I try to check in and say, is this what I want to do today? Right? My partner and I have that kind of relationship. Do we want to make this commitment? Every new fund, every new investment, every new period of time, I'm checking in. Is this how I want to spend my limited time on this planet? And pretty much every day for the last 9 years, I've said yes.
You talk about now. I've interviewed probably 2,000 people over the years of doing this through the different brands that I built and shut down a ton of these guys because it's hard building a brand. The one question that I love when I meet someone who has built something and struggled through something deep like you have, and then they say something like, like internal drivers, whether right or wrong, self recognition is, the need for validation, approval, acceptance, right? I think we all have that as a human being. That's a driving force. You've learned to give that self recognition, but that is something that some people will never get. I want you to give some insights on that to the founder who just went bankrupt, to the founder who just had to close down shop or I'm working with a guy who has to lay off some of his team. And that, that's going to be under attack. Your identity is going to be under attack. What have you discovered there?
Boy, you nailed it. It's identity. So I think the first step for me has been recognizing I have an identity, right? I've built and sort of chosen in many ways, consciously or unconsciously, an identity. Mark is an entrepreneur, Mark is successful, Mark is this and that. Well, if I buy into that, right, and that business fails, I have to let go of people, then my identity is at risk, right? And that's very challenging for most people. The first step for me is recognizing that's an identity. There's a part of me that is not that. There's a part of me that is deep inside of me, is separate from that identity. That part of me can't be unvalidated, can't be unrecognized. It is, frankly, pure spirit in a way. And so acknowledging that and seeing that itself has been helpful. And I'll tell you where I learned that was I had the good fortune of Zico, my intention was to sell it. It was on a path to be sold, and I had a couple of years to get ready for that. And so I consciously started to separate my identity. I love Zico. I'm passionate about it. I felt like it was my son. I have two beautiful daughters and this one rambunctious, high potential son called Zico. But I knew he's going to go off. I'm not him. And it's the same with my girls, right? They're not me. They're their own people, right? So that's separation of identity. The second thing for me was to understand that exactly what you said. My read of psychology and a lot of research I've done on neuroscience, there's sort of three core underlining drivers for everyone in life. There's a few more, but the desire to be acknowledged, to feel secure, to have control. And there's a fourth some people add, which is a desire for unity, to feel united with another or the world. But those first three, acknowledgement, control, and security, they underlie everything from my lens and everything I've read. And so in any situation I'm in, I try to recognize that. Whenever I feel triggered, angry, upset, I've got to let somebody go. I've got to make a decision. I've been told no, and I have an emotional reaction. My first thought is, okay, what am I thinking? Um, I'm a bad person. I'm not, nobody wants to work with me. Nobody wants to invest in Zico, right? Why would they do that? Well, okay, what am I feeling? I have a desire to be acknowledged. I want to be acknowledged. You're a good person. You've done a great job. You've built a great brand. I want the security of knowing that's, my identity's safe. And I want the control of saying, Josh, please back me and back my company. The final trick is, and there's a lot of people that have written about this over the years, of either releasing, letting go, is to say, okay, Mark, isn't that beautiful? You'd love to have acknowledgement. You'd love to have control. You'd love to have security. Can I let that go? Can I let go that this is not my identity? Can I let go? I really have no control over a lot of life. Can I let go? My greatest security is just being alive. So I have had to fire a lot of people in my life. I never like it, but I'm very comfortable in tough situations because I'm able to say, feel what's going on with me, empathize with another, but do what needs to be done, right? And give myself that acknowledgement, control, sense of security, or let go to a certain extent of the desire for it and the need for it. And all of a sudden I'm free. It's unbelievably liberating to be able the source of one's own acknowledgement, control, and security.
Yeah. Fantastic. I love the way you approach that. So let's just say it's a stool, acknowledgement, control, security, with sometimes the unity piece where you think that, but let's focus on the stool.
Yeah.
Which leg gets kicked out hurts the hardest for you?
Oh boy, great question. Acknowledgement.
Me too.
And what I know from, there's a lot of sort of, pop psychology, I would say positive psychology. It says, oh, you don't need to look back on your past, only go into the future. I don't know. I have found it really helpful to recognize there's a little Mark that is, 6 years old, youngest of six kids, crazy family. Everybody's running around. My parents have raised five kids. Are they paying attention to this youngest one? All very loving, all high intention, no blame or shame anywhere. Little Mark wants to be acknowledged. That is the core underlying wound, I would say, for me. So I know it. I see it come up all the time. It sometimes can cause me problems, but the beauty is it can also be powerful when I know it and I can use it and I can channel it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Channeling that internal energy because it's going to happen whether we like it or not. And a self aware person could acknowledge it, right? So I could look at it and go, why are you upset? Why are you feeling this way? Why did you wake up at 4 in the morning to work on these things? And part of my drive is I have a high need for acknowledgement. I really
Yeah,
do. And maybe that's why I do a lot of podcast shows so I can
probably.
maybe, right? But
Yeah.
there's when I feel
Actors, artists tend to have.
exactly when I feel like I'm out of control with our finances, we've had, times where we had a lot of money in the bank, and then we've had times where we're like, no kids, no ice cream tonight because daddy's got to work, right? But when I feel out of control, I could tap into this like machine that could work around the clock. I can't do it for a long period of time, but I could do that. So I really love what you're sharing. And I think this is so helpful for investors, for founders, for entrepreneurs to be able to hear this kind of message, not just grind it out, kids. Like,
Yeah.
you hear some people sharing,
Yeah.
but knowing thyself, to thine own self be true, but knowing how to tap into energy, tap into power, tap into this stuff. How did you learn it? Therapy? Me too, right? But what was that day where you go, something's off, I need some support, I need some help? How did you ask for that help?
Yeah. Well, it's funny you asked that. I think in many ways, it was after selling Zico. And so, you know, I had, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs, people have this formula in their head, right? Have a great idea, work hard, you know, build a successful business, make a lot of money, and then you'll be free, right? That's sort of the equation that I thought was true. And I followed that to the T, right? I had a great idea. I busted my ass for 9 years, built a great business, sold it, and all of a sudden had money in the bank. In many ways, more money in the bank than I had ever dreamed of. And I actually had set my goal early on. Built a beautiful house on the beach, and I was, absolutely could have retired, very early 40s, as long as I wasn't, trying to do private jets around the world and crazy yachts. And what I found is, um, I didn't find the meaning that I thought I would find. And I noticed myself in many ways, not feeling, fundamentally free. I found myself, frankly, drinking quite a bit,
Mhm.
um, um, you know, uh, 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 um, investing without a lot of discipline, a lot of angel investing without a lot of rationale or discipline behind it. And when I look at the way I was living my life, I started to say, frankly, my marriage started to what appeared to be a beautiful marriage from our own perspective and outside perspectives. There were cracks in the foundation that I
Yeah.
think went back to this difficult time of Zico. So in many ways, I felt like, this dream I was working towards of sort of the freedom where I can do whatever I want, whenever I want to do it, was a myth, you know. And so I began to see, wait a second, this isn't all I thought it would be.
Yeah.
And so that caused me to start to really go inward and look at, okay, eventually I got to a place where, no shame, no blame, just curiosity. Fascinating. What did I believe would happen? I'll give you an example. I thought I was done with business. I thought actually I was going to, sell Zico, and then I was just going to go do nonprofit work. I was going to, save the world. I was done with this little business stuff, making money stuff.
Yeah.
And I realized in many ways I was denying this core of me that has this drive, has this loves business. I felt some guilt around that. Maybe it was Catholic guilt. I'm not blaming, my family for that, but
Yeah.
I interpreted it that way. So it was frankly the fact that I was one of the successful ones,
Yeah.
and still I found this to be lacking. I found it to be, I didn't have that core inner satisfaction, that satiation that
Yeah.
I thought I would have. And that started me on really a decade long search, for I would say in many ways for freedom,
Yeah.
freedom from, regardless of the amount of money, regardless of the amount of success, I wanted to feel free in everything I did. And that's been my journey since then.
Yeah. Man's Search for Freedom. That's kind of
Yeah,
lines up with
it
Victor's
really
book, Man's
does.
Search for Meaning. Um, Man, when you have a lot of money in the bank and you could kind of take a breath, man, I've been struggling for 9 years, 15 years, fill in the blank, and oh, that money, you're sitting there waiting for that wire to happen, right? And then you see it and you're like, wow, you get this ecstatic jump, and then 10 minutes later, it literally lasts 10, 15 minutes, and then that joy is gone again. How long did it take for you to start searching for risky investments, for like how long did that take from wire transfer to looking for the next hit?
Next hit in a
Yeah.
way.
Yep.
I would say it happened even before the wire hit the bank because, yeah, I had started building some network. I'd thought about, where I would invest, where I would start to, both invest and spend the money. And it's not like, I lived a ridiculous life. It was certainly within our means. And if anything, I had the spending problem more than my wife did, but it was pretty quick.
Yeah.
And the funny thing was, I thought I would be different than so many others. I thought, oh, that's not going to be me. I'm not going to be that way. But I'll tell you what, this has been fascinating in my journey from an entrepreneur to investor. I've come to realize why so few great entrepreneurs become great investors. And because, and in many ways, it took me about 5 years to sort of, you know, train the entrepreneur out of me, kind of beat the entrepreneur out of me.
Yeah.
And one of the main reasons is because I'm an optimist, and entrepreneurs are optimists, and we see possibilities. And so the mistake I made as an investor is I'd meet somebody, I'd hear their pitch, I'd see their idea, and I'd think, oh, yeah, I can see how this could work with this or this tweak or that tweak. I'm sure they can see that too, and I'm sure they'll figure that out, what I see, right? And interestingly, a lot of that goes back to me as a kid. I see now I had ADHD as a kid. It wasn't terrible, but I struggled with attention. And I never thought I was dumb, but I didn't think I was that smart. And so I'd assumed all my life, if I can do it, well, anybody can do it. And so as an entrepreneur, that's helpful, right? As an investor, it's terrible, right?
Yes.
Because we're
Yes.
backing the person, we're backing the reality of the situation, not only the potential. And so a lot of the investments I made were because I was overconfident. I did have that sort of energy and excitement of having been successful. And I thought if I saw a possibility, that it must be there, and that any entrepreneur is going to be able to go execute against that. And whew, man, I had some good wins, fortunately, but man, a lot of painful losses.
Tony Robbins, when maybe my first or second identity crisis and losing all my money, he says, yes, we have a need for certainty. And when like this idea of I'm going to make it, cash out, and then I'll have certainty, right? I have control, I have freedom, financial freedom. I could say, no to whatever opportunity I don't want, right? So you think, and we're all working towards this financial freedom or freedom of choice. Then when we get it, we have ultimate certainty to whatever extent, but we also on the flip side need uncertainty. So
Mhm.
entrepreneurs, guys like you and me, will start getting risky. We'll start doing things that could self-sabotage because we need that level of uncertainty too. We need that risk, that reward, that drive, that chase. Especially if it's wired into us as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Let me ask this question to that 6-year-old boy, right? My therapist or counselor, I don't know the difference. One gets paid much more, I'm sure, and
Right,
one gives
right.
you drugs. But he had me look into a mirror at that 6-year-old Josh and say, "Hey, you're good enough."
Yeah.
And I was
Yeah.
like, "This is bullshit. This is good." I was doing it one day. I looked in the mirror and I said, "You're good enough. Like it's gonna be okay. We love you." And I started crying. Grown
Yeah.
ass man, thought I was tough. I was crying.
Yeah. Yeah. No.
Had ha, have you had any experiences like that where you had to actually had some tough conversations with yourself?
Yeah. I would say even less tough, more loving, right? Because that's a loving
That's
conversation.
sweet. Yeah, go for it.
And I think that's one thing. Entrepreneurs tend to be so hard. Tend to be so hard on ourselves, so hard on ourselves. And so I really try to encourage in myself, but also with all the entrepreneurs I work with, all the CEOs, executive teams, to have some compassion. Hold to the expectations, see reality, but no shame, no blame. We're here because we're here, but have some compassion for people in their situation, right?
Yeah.
So yes, I have. I've done that same work, and that's been helpful. And I'll tell you one of the most interesting realizations for me was I was critical of my family in some ways, my community where I grew up, because I felt like, I had this story I was telling myself, if you know this concept, the stories we tell ourselves, was I would have been even more successful if I had had, the acknowledgement, the support that I needed as an individual
Mm.
versus, my siblings. And I went with that story for a long time. And through some of this work and through my therapy, I started to ask the question, as I do now with almost anything I think, am I certain it's true? I look back on that story and I say, am I certain that's true? And the reality is, if you really ask that question about almost anything, it's impossible to be certain. Back to Tony Robbins' point, like uncertainty is just part of life, right? Acknowledging that is powerful. So in this situation, for me, what I acknowledged was the possibility. That's the reason I'm as successful as I am,
Yeah.
is that had I been more acknowledged, I might be a very happy gym teacher today,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And nothing wrong with that life, but I like my life, right? So
Yep.
I actually look back now and I do have given myself that acknowledgement, but I've also acknowledged the lack of acknowledgement gave me my drive, which I love, right? And
Hmm.
that just was a nuance for me that was helpful of saying, what if it's just all meant to be exactly like it is, right?
Hmm.
My journey is just these ups and downs. And what if you know the story about the Chinese proverb supposedly about the farmer and the horse, right?
And his son,
Like,
yeah.
yeah, his son. What if this is the best thing that's meant to happen to me, right?
Mm.
I'm meant to struggle with Zico for 9 years. I'm meant to struggle with ground force for a certain number of years because this is the learning that's going to prepare me for who knows what in the future.
Yeah. That's so good. And that comes, it's reframing a story of our past, right? I've been screwed out of lots of money. And I held this grudge and man, it was eating me up, but it was
Yeah.
affecting my current businesses, right? And I had to learn to go back and forgive that person, let that go, and also beyond forgiving but be thankful for what I learned from that situation, right? And when I turned that to a level of like gratitude, and my successes opened up, my opportunities, and I'm not a woo-woo at all. But I think that there are some fundamental universal principles in play here on these, these stools or even the four legs of what you're
Yeah.
sharing, what humans need, and also how we treat each other. So let's parlay that into Ground Force Capital, an investment firm that's focusing on doing good. So let
Hmm.
me just read this. Ground Force Capital is an investment management firm that backs high potential companies seeking to improve the health and longevity of people and the planet. Why does that even matter there, Mark?
Yeah, great question. Great question. So, look, we spent a lot of time sort of thinking about that as a firm, particularly my partner and I. And we follow a pretty simple philosophy, which is I forget even where this come from, but it's sort of a three piece Venn diagram. The first and where those overlap. The first is, hey, what are we passionate about? What do we love that we can get up, every morning for the next 20 years and do, and it doesn't feel like working. Um, Along with that, what do we think we can be great at because we're passionate about it? What does the world need? Where do we see an economic opportunity, or let's say a problem or an business opportunity?
Hmm.
And where can we make money? We make
Hmm.
money, and the whole system make money to fuels this, right? So when we looked at those three, we both have a real lifelong passion for health and wellness. I've been, interested in health and wellness since I was a kid. My parents were, early, well, late in some ways, growing their own food, homemade granola. We ate super healthy growing up. I've always ate that way my entire life. I've been very active with my partner's a hardcore athlete, was a D1 tennis player, ultra athlete,
Wow.
multiple marathons and Ironman and things like that. And so we just love that world. And so that we're really passionate about that. I built, Zico, he built a brand called Health Warrior after he was a hedge fund manager for about a decade, so he loves finance as well. So that's sort of who we are. When we looked at the world and what's happening here, there's a lot of opportunity in a lot of areas, but we sort of narrowed in on the food system and looked at it and said, wait a second, this is a $7 trillion global market,
Hmm.
massive, and it's basically at its core, it's been built since post-World War II to deliver really cheap calories really efficiently. And we've done that very well. The problem is that most people now understand those are linked to health problems,
Hmm.
and those health problems become economic opportunities, economic problems. And
Hmm.
that whole area we see as an opportunity. So we believe the food system actually is in the process of being rebuilt from the bottom up to be more about health and wellness. And right now, the food system is not sustainable at all, right? And
Right.
it emits, it's 30% is wasted, it's high in carbon utilization, tons of fossil fuels. There's a better way, and we've known for 10,000 years better ways to sort of grow and produce and transport food. So we think there's a massive opportunity to disrupt this huge system. And we see this as an opportunity to make money that ultimately fuels this positive impact. And so, what our pitch to our investors is, and ourselves as we put money against this is, hey, somebody's going to build the next Coca-Cola, the next Kraft, the next Heinz, the next Unilever, the next Nestle. Maybe it's brands within that portfolio. Maybe it's whole massive corporations, right? So we want to be a part of that. Then we narrowed in and said, okay, where do we again love? Where can we add value? Where can we win? Early stage is interesting, but really tough. We're not experts in, buying and building multi-billion-dollar companies. So we really like the growth stage. So we decided to narrow in on the growth stage. And so, we think right now we're one of the best in the world. And when it comes to finding funding and helping scale growth stage, food, beverage, food service, food tech, expanding into a little bit outside of food and the beauty and some other products, and then close into the supply chain, the technologies that enable those companies. That's our sweet spot, right? And so we wake up every morning. We've built an incredible team of professionals, both our own as well as advisors, that are all committed. Like, look, we're going to do our little part to help rebuild the food system, and along the way, we think we're going to make ourselves and our investors, and those in the companies and those in the whole ecosystem a lot of money.
I love it, man. Uh, Good to great is the theory of the groundhog principle. Passionate about, good, great at, world needs. There's an economic driver where that hits in the Venn diagram. Um, I think a lot of people out there, they look at the world through passion. What am I passionate about? Or,
Yeah.
and they don't put those all together. You got to have the economic driver, the who's going to pay for it, or you're just handing out someone else's money, and that dries up pretty quick.
Yep. Very good point.
Yeah, I love the fact that you found your hedgehog principle, but you also found your niche in the industry and the stage of business that you're at. And I'll tell you, Zico, I've seen Zico, and everyone knows Liquid Death. Like you guys, there's some great marketing behind that company,
Yeah.
phenomenal leadership and great marketing behind that. Um, let's talk about how you got back in the game, right? Buying back your company.
Right.
What's the story there?
Yeah, so the story there is like I mentioned before, I'd been out of Zico for, God, at that point had been 7 years or so, and I moved on, and I thought I'd never going to be involved in that brand or category again until, I heard through the grapevine, through some inside sources, that Coke was about to, do this massive strategic transfer, or switch, and Zico was sort of going to go out with a bit, the baby out with the bathwater, so to say. And so, but at this point, we've got ground force. We're an institutional firm. So immediately, I talked to my partner about this. We talked to some early Zico investors, a guy named Jesse Itzler. It's pretty big in the
Yeah.
influencer world. He was a friend, an early Zico investor, some others that were involved early on. And we all sort of looked at this and said, man, there's a real opportunity here. And then we have a team that then goes deep, right? Where we have all ex private equity, investment bankers and private equity. So we're looking at the data, we're looking at the velocities, we're looking at the margins and category growth and competition. So we do a full investment memo on this. I actually recused myself from the investment committee to make sure I'm not biased, even though I have no economic interest, even passion interest. But we concluded, look, this is a real opportunity. It's now $1 billion category, one major competitor. It ticks all the boxes that we would look for. It just happens to be, a brand I know, and love, and it happens to be a startup, which we haven't done in the past because we only bought the brand, right? So the first thing we did was put together a world-class team because I knew I can't run it. I've got my day job is, at Ground Force. I've got other investments, but also there's no humility in this. I was good. There are great entrepreneurs out there. You mentioned Liquid Death. Mike Cesario is one of the best marketers on the planet, right? I know now what great looks like in leadership. And so we put a team in place to run Zico that is doing a way better job than I could have, for sure.
Yeah.
And they're grinders. They know the beverage industry cold. They've been in it for longer than I had. So they helped get it up and running. And we're always building and always upgrading. So we actually just brought on a new CEO. And in a testament to, personal character, you talked about identity. Imagine this. We had a CEO, guy in his 50s, very experienced person, had done a fantastic job. I've known him for a long time. I had to have a conversation with him that said, Tom, you're not the guy for this next phase. You've done a fantastic job to get the business from where it is till now. It's now very successful, but if we're going to take it from where we are to 150 million plus, we need a different leadership style. And that was challenging for him, but he looked at it and said he agreed. So he now moved to chief commercial officer. So he stayed with the company. He's running sales. He's in his zone of genius. And
Ooh.
we've got this new CEO who's in his zone of genius. I get to be in my zone of genius. So it's been a fascinating process. It's building faster than it did the first time around, but
Mhm.
it's challenging. Like if anything, it gives me an added degree of compassion and sort of acknowledgement for what entrepreneurs go through. Because even though I'm not running it every day, man, I'm in it, right? We're discussions. Where do we go to market? How do we think about supply chain? I'm going to Thailand to help the team there. I'm going to investor meetings. I'm helping them raise, money right now. So it's like I'm back in it, but I love it. I absolutely love it. Doesn't mean it doesn't mean it's easy. Doesn't mean it takes a lot of work, but it's this, and what I love now particularly is having the ability to actually be both in it but see it from the outside. Be both in it, but not have my identity 100% wrapped up in it.
That's so good. I think for the self-awareness, I think is brilliant, and I think we need to be able to do our best, do that what we love, do who we're, like do the things that we feel like we're supposed to do,
Yeah.
serve the people we're supposed to serve, but be detached from the outcomes. And I
There,
think that's
gosh,
challenging.
you and I are cut from the same cloth. I love that phrase, and my partner Caroline has this phrase, hold it lightly. Just hold it lightly. You can have it, but maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't. Maybe, and this is back to these key questions. Maybe I just didn't understand the bigger picture, right? So I'll be specific. I thought Zico was going to scale instantly. I thought we were going to be a $50 million brand within 2 years because it was $150 million before. This is going to be easy. It's not going to take us a lot of money. It's not going to take us a lot of time. Woo, man. You know, Consumers move on, retailers fill shelf space. Freight went from 2,000 to 20,000 a container from Asia. It was tough. And it's not easy, but I do remind myself, all right, I was holding pretty tightly to a specific outcome. Let me just hold it a little bit more lightly and expand my sense of outcome, right? Okay,
Mm.
it's going to take a few more years. Okay, it's going to take a few more dollars. That just is what it is. Otherwise it's lunacy to deny reality, right? That's
Yeah.
just what it's going to take this time around.
Yeah. It's gorgeous. There's probably a question that I should have asked you. We'll give everybody your contact info at the end, but there's probably a question that you're like, Josh, I teed it up for you, man. Like you missed it. What question should I have asked you during this interview?
Oh God, Josh, I don't know. We've gone to places I wasn't expecting. I guess maybe one question might be, what's my new dream for Zico? You
What's your
know?
new dream for Zico there, Mark?
Yeah. So look, in many ways, it's the same dream, just a little bit different. My original dream was, to see coconut water become a multi-billion dollar global category because I wanted to see this healthy, amazing product be available across the world. I wanted to see Zico become a brand that would be known for health and wellness and encourage healthy, natural, active living and live forever. And the third objective, believe it or not, was sell to Coca-Cola, right? The other two remained the same. I want to see coconut water is probably a billion in the US. It's probably 8 billion plus globally. I want to see it become 10x the size it is today. I want to see Zico become one of the most known beverage brands globally. And I want to see the business survive as well, right? First time around, I was focused on brand, not building a really sustainable, profitable, long-term valuable business. That's the change this time around. So my vision is that, whether we're not going to own it forever, right? We're an investment firm, so we're going to have to at least recoup our capital. Doesn't mean we have to sell the whole company, but we'll figure that out. But I want to see, Zico become, one of the most respected and loved beverage brands in the world. And along the way, have us and our current, new investors in this, make fantastic returns. The other thing I want to see is, the everybody that's involved, the team that's in the US. We have an incredible team in Asia that works for the company, a network of suppliers, partners. I want to see all of them have a chance to kind of realize their full potential as well. What are they trying to achieve in their lives? What are they trying to grow their businesses? What are their financial goals? And let Zico be a vehicle that helps, numerous people, not just me, achieve their dreams.
Phenomenal. Awesome. So good. Uh, Mark, where can people go to connect with you and learn more about you and your business?
Boy, I'm not the best on social media, Josh. So I probably would say LinkedIn is the place. That's the one place that I'm pretty good and have some help on. But they can find me there, groundforcecapital.com. People can find out more about the firm there and learn about me and Zico.com to learn about Zico.
Super cool. Fellow deal makers, as always, reach out to our guests. Say thanks for being on the show. Their contact information will be in the show notes below. I love you guys. And if you have a deal that you'd like to talk about or maybe you could educate our community on, head on over to thedealscout.com, fill out a quick form, maybe get you on the show next. Till then, we'll talk to you all on the next episode. Cheers, everyone.